Hi, I'm Dave Withrow, publisher of American Bagger magazine. We've got a new monthly feature that we're doing on our website, AmericanBagger.com, that's brought to you by Screaming Eagle Films. It's called Tech Time. Once a month, we're going to give you real-world tech that you can do at home in your garage. Enjoy.
All right, one of the most popular discussions on the internet happens to be Bagger Wobble, or high-speed wobble. There's many different solutions to this, or different variations of different products. This is one of those products. This is made by Glide Pro, and this is a stabilizing pivot bolt. We will be installing this today on our turboed Road King. In an effort to try to make the job a little bit easier, we're going to try using two jacks. One will be directly in front of the cross member that's under the transmission, and the other one will actually be touching the oil pan that's underneath the transmission. The reason for the second jack is what this is doing is the transmission is actually connected to the swing arm. So what we're doing here is we're lifting up just enough to take all the pressure off the pivot bolt, which will allow us to remove the old one. What this little chrome circle does is basically it's a cover which allows access to the pivot nut. Okay, we're going to start by removing the pivot block on the right side of the bike. With the two jacks in place and all the weights off of this, we can actually remove the pivot block on the left side of the bike also. Okay, now we have access to the factory pivot bolt nut, and there's one on each side of the bike, and so we'll use two 11/16 deep well sockets to remove them. Okay, here you can see that we have one of the pivot shaft nuts removed, and this is the metal washer that sits behind it. And then behind that is what they call the rubber biscuit. That's what rubber mounts the rear part of your motor assembly. With one of the pivot shaft nuts removed, this one happened to be on the right side, we can now pull the pivot shaft out from the other side, or in this case the left side, as long as, like I said earlier, the second jack is in the right spot. There won't be any tension on that pivot spot. This happens to be a newer model Road King, this one being an 04. So it actually has two spacers and two nuts, one on each side. Some of the older ones you'll find have only one nut and a solid welded nut on the other side of the shaft, so in some cases you'll only be able to remove the shaft from one side. Well, the way this works is the new shaft replaces the old shaft, but it still uses the rubber biscuits from the old setup. So you can get rid of the old spacers and the old nuts, and then basically the way this works is these sit, they're directional like they say out here, but they sit inside the rubber biscuits on each side. They'll actually pull flush, but then this will sit through. That's why the shaft is longer, is to accept the fact it's going to be out here. Okay, before we slide the new pivot shaft into place, we're going to apply some anti-seize to it. Again, back to this being a newer style bike, it doesn't have an actual clev block in the swing arm. It has a different style spacer. This will have to be taken out to put the pivot bolt in. To help get the rubber Glide Pro bushing inside the stock bushing, we're going to use a little bit of wax or any other kind of non-permanent lubrication will work. Make sure it's lined up and in the right position. when starting to install the whole bushing assembly, you can take a look and you can see there's a notch right at the top of it. That will also match the notch in the top part of the pivot block. So those two can fit together and slide over the shaft. Make sure it's in the right spot, and then we can start our pivot block bolts. We'll also use some red thread locker to make sure they don't come out. Okay, with the pivot block hardware snug, we're going to torque it down with a torque wrench to 35 foot-pounds. Then we just repeat the process on the other side. With the pivot bolts in place, we can now put the pivot shaft nut on. Okay, with the pivot shaft bolts started, we're going to torque them down to 45 foot-pounds. Okay, all that's left is to replace the chrome covers and remove the jacks. Hope you enjoyed it. That's Glide Pro's solution to the Bagger Wobble.